Every book has a moment before the page. A decision, a risk, a story worth telling. This is Authors After Action. Conversations with authors about the journey, the work, and the lessons learned along the way.
Welcome, everybody, to Authors After Action. I am your guest, Donald Dunn. Today, we've got Sarah Marshall. Sarah is a lifelong seeker shaped by wild landscapes, global travel, and a deep reverence for the intelligence of place. Her life bridges worlds that rarely meet, military and mystic strategist and artist, engineer, and wanderer. With decades of spiritual practice, movement disciplines, and culture immersion across 6 continents, she writes from lived transformation. Her novel, Playa Dust in My Soul, emerges from a life devoted to listening, belonging, and becoming. Welcome to the show, Miss Sarah. How you doing?
Thank you. Great. And thanks for having me here, Donald.
Hey, absolutely. I love it. So why don't we dig into a little bit of your background? What brought you into wanting to, write a book and all that good stuff that a lot of people don't know how much work goes into?
So I never wanted to be an author per se. It wasn't like, oh, I'm growing up, I want to be an author, I want to write. I did write, I liked writing, but I never thought of it. I always thought I needed to go have experience out in the world. And when you're writing, you're not experiencing, you're documenting.
Yeah.
So I always saw myself as more of a traveler, an adventurer, getting out in the world and experiencing the world. What prompted me to write this book was I started going to Burning Man at the beginning of the 2000s, at the turn of the millennium. Mm-hmm. And it had already civilized from the Wild West that it was beforehand, but it was still figuring out what it was going to be. And I only went because 2 different groups of my friends started really chewing on me to go out there. This is going to be great for you. It'll be perfect. And so I just felt like there was a kismet, and I went out. And my first year experience out there, because I was pretty buttoned down, like you said, military, engineer, doing martial arts, very, just kind of a not a rigid, but definitely a cadenced life. Mm-hmm. So I just thought, I'll get to that sometime. But I felt this pressure from 2 different groups. So I went out and I spent the first 3 days out there with my mouth open. It was just so much was going on, so much that I just had no place to put it. And for all my capacity to deal with physical adventure, mountaineering, doing stuff out in various parts of the world, being in this environment where it really was intense on my soul was it was a boggling experience for me. And I also had transitioned just about 3 or 4 years before, and I was still getting my feet on the ground of what it was to be a woman in the world. Mm-hmm. After so many years of not being that. Yeah. And I didn't know consciously, I was not comfortable with that yet. So being trans was like front and center of my identity. When I interacted with people, I assumed that they were interacting with me and had some judgments about me, etc. So I had this cushion between me and the rest of the world that was this identity. And Burning Man challenged every aspect of that. The first thing I realized as I was engaging with people out there is me being trans was the least interesting thing about me. And they wanted to know different things. They wanted to know more about me. They wanted to engage me. And I had no capacity for that. So I had to go through a whole process to get there. So when I was driving off to Playa that year, I remember saying to the guy that I was driving out with, I said, wow, I think I'm finally ready to be at Burning Man. And it took me the whole week to get there. But I had to go through a whole transformational experience that was in this cauldron of intensity to get there. And so the seed of the idea of this story started there. And then I started talking to friends and saying, hey, it would be great if you wrote this story. This would be a great story. And of course, everybody that I talked to ran away. So it really left me to tell the story. And I took a cut at it. The first time, like mid 2000s, and it was horrible. It was a lot of great information. It told you all about the event, but it wasn't a story. And then I spent 20 years of working at it, putting it down, working at it, putting it down, getting feedback, listening to podcasts, working on it, and going through iteration after iteration to, in essence, carve a story out of a mountain of information. And so if anybody was persistent at working at it till it was something that should be shared, it was the last 25 years or 20 plus years of my life working on this story.
Yeah. One, I think Burning Man itself, a lot of people don't fully know what it is and what that whole story is. On top of what you said, you were still working on yourself before you went to this event that has became massive, which brings in a whole lot of stuff. So you're carrying your doubts, you're carrying your emotions into this event where a lot of it's about healing, and people maybe have more advanced in healing and they're past some of their journeys. And that's where it brought to people's questions to more about you than about your transition or any of that type of stuff. Right.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
You probably at that point wasn't even prepared, because like you said, you've experienced a lot of judgment and you just assume that judgment's coming with first introductions.
Yep.
And, then on top of that, you experience all that stuff, and then you decide to take on writing, which is a whole nother beast. I can honestly say, if I knew what I was going to have to do just through the editing process for my first book, there probably would have never been a first book. And my first book was about my experiences through the military and PTSD. And it was just a document to my family to explain the things that I never explained. And I didn't think in my mind that when I went through that editing process, how many times I was going to have to relive those events and reread them over and over again. And I think healing comes from writing as well, because of those types of things. It makes you take these pains and things that you're talking about in your story, and you're grabbing it by the horns, and you still have to fight it and toss it back and forth until it becomes what you want it to be. And you said that based off of, all the times of putting it down, picking it up, because it becomes a lot. What were some of the things that caused you to have to put that book down and take that break and then come back?
Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head, that even though my book is fiction, it is very much rooted in my experience, both my personal experience and the experience of people that were in my life. And because of that, I had to pull out and deal with my demons and really hash through them and come to peace with those demons in order to tell the story. So the first time I wrote it, I was like this, I have all this great information. Here it is. And people would read it and go, wow, this is a lot. I mean, my book is long as books go. It's in the close to 300 pages. But it was 4 times as long when I first wrote it. So I had to really cut it out. So the first time I wrote it, I had some friends review it, and I went, oh, there's so much to do here. There's so much to do. And I invested so much to get it to here, and I'm going to have to go back and do it again. And also the stories, the characters that I created in it, I didn't really make them nuanced, and I really didn't dive into their psyches much. I made them the white hat, black hat people, and really I need to turn them into real human beings. And to do that, I had to tap into my real experience and the real things that I was feeling. Like the character that most closely maps to me, because there's a piece of me in every character. Right. The one that most closely maps to me is a trans woman named Rachel. And when I first wrote her, I wrote her as a hero. And in order to tell a real story, I had to really take her back to the bones of where I was, and then add the reality of what it was, and the warts and the ugliness, and realizing that there's no good guys or bad guys. There are human beings that can either lean into their better half or their worst half, and take people through that journey. So I had to keep iterating to get closer and closer to the reality of who these people were for me and who I was in this. And so it was as much a psychological journey as it was a writing journey.
Yeah. I think that what you just said there, I think is the thing that most new authors don't realize is going to happen. And you are going to invest so much into your book, your project, right? And to do it, like you just said, you had a character that was really you, and you took her back down to your bones, and you're recreating her. But what you're really doing at this point is you're looking at yourself in a third person and kind of doing a review. And I found myself doing that same thing in my book, when I wrote about myself and the mistakes that I made and how I dealt with PTSD. And I remember at one point writing about this guy, and I'm like, what an asshole, and that's how I felt as a human too, about this same guy that I'm writing about. And then it allowed me to also start evaluating the hand that person was dealt. Why did they make the decisions they made?
This episode is brought to you by Barracks Media, where your online presence becomes a real asset. Barracks Media builds professional websites for podcasters, creators, authors, and small businesses who are ready to be taken seriously. Not templates, not cookie-cutter pages, real platforms built to grow with you. Whether you're launching a podcast, promoting a book, or building a brand, your website should work as hard as you do. We design sites that convert listeners into followers and followers into clients. Visit barracksmedia.com and turn your idea into a home on the web.
And I think that's where the healing process from these kind of books really come from, is the fact that you can go back and reevaluate what happened.
Yes. So I have 7 characters, and every one of those characters, like I said, there's a piece of me in them, but they're both, they have grace, and they're just assholes. As you said, they do asshole things, because we all do asshole things. And I had to let those characters do those things in order to fully earn the art that they have in the book.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody out there who thinks that you can't learn real life lessons from fiction books, I'm here to tell you that is not true. 100%. There's probably more stories told that are fiction that have been used to teach lessons than nonfiction books, all the way back into biblical times. People used to tell fictional stories to make sure that the kids didn't wander off into the woods by themselves. And they would use these stories just to scare the kids, to make sure they wouldn't go out into the woods by themselves, and it wasn't because they wanted to scare the kids. It was, they wanted the lesson to be taught without pain and without problems. And in these kind of books, that same concept can be done. I want to dig a little bit into the character side. Yep. For me, I found when I wrote my first fiction book, I'm a stickler for that detail, right? I like to, one, be able to know how that person's going to talk, what they're going to look like, what are their likes. I'm just very anal about that. And I found myself writing little stories about each character so that I could refer back to them. Because, some of the PTSD meds I have, it does affect my memory and stuff like that. And so sometimes I have to have that stuff wrote down so I can refer back to when I'm getting in the latter part of the book. How did you do that did you build the character scenes that same way by kind of creating little stories about what that person is, their likes, their characters, where they grew up, that type of stuff?
I'm smiling because I was arguably overambitious. So each of my characters, I wrote a complete backstory for. I wrote scenes where there would be flashbacks that I had to take them out of the finals. But I know each one of those characters from practically birth and what they went through to get to be who they are. And that was a really important part of developing those characters because my daughter, who has been, if you read the acknowledgments in my book, she has not only been my number one cheerleader, she has inhabited every character and said, Mom, that character wouldn't do that. That character is like, and you're like, right, I'm being I'm easy on the character. I need to let that character breathe who they are.
Yeah.
And she also did all the art in the book as well. So it was a real family affair.
That's awesome. One of the things that we're looking at adding to our nonprofit is an art therapy program. And there is so many cool things that can come from art, from therapy, not only finding yourself, but expressing yourself. And those are some very important things. And it's awesome that your daughter was involved in this process as well and doing the artwork for you, because it becomes more personal at that point.
It does. And you're making a really great point. A lot of most of my Burning Man friends, my camp friends that I camp with are artists. They're overt. That's what they do in life. They're working production companies for movie industry and stuff like. So I've always considered myself in the art world. I'm the stage hand that is building the stage for people to do their thing on. And what I didn't realize in that process is that my art is writing. I didn't see myself as an author till I got there, but my art is in writing. So that's what I provide in art. And I also, when I go to Burning Man, the number one thing other than being with my chosen family is to experience the art on the desert, because it just takes me into boggling places.
Yeah. I just had a guest on one of my other shows. His grandfather, who was a World War II vet, was very passionate about American Indian art, right? In the pottery and stuff like that. And he foreseen that this isn't stuff that should just be sold on the side of the road, as knickknack type stuff. It needs to be in a museum. And he really took it forward there in Colorado and pushed it to be in museums. And now there's museums in areas just named after him from all the work that he did. But what you just said is exactly what he felt. He looked at stuff and seen it in a complete different time frame than what that time frame was back then, where people were looking at these people as lesser people, and their art was just knickknack junk on the side of the road. He's seen value in it, and now people like us, 50 years later, are now getting to enjoy this stuff and seeing it in the same way that he's seen it 50 years ago. So art does amazing things for people.
That's so interesting. So part of my growing up experience, I had family living on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. And this is one of my characters, one of the artists that is a character in my book is part Lakota. He's a Sioux Indian. And my grandfather ran a museum at Wounded Knee that showcased that stuff. So my growing up experience was exactly that, being around somebody that curated things that might have been junk to somebody else, but told a whole story about a people that were, once occupied the whole land and now we're in narrow little crevices of it.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie, with I don't know that I really brought much value to that episode with him, because my whole time was like this. He was just so fascinating. But let's talk a little bit more on your book. I didn't mean to. I had a squirrel moment there, and my squirrel ran away. But
I can talk in any direction.
did you publish traditionally or did you self-publish? Which route did you go?
I self-published purposefully. I
Okay.
considered the other way, but Burning Man is a scrappy event. It's an event that decommodifies, doesn't believe in making money off of things. And I wanted to publish in a way to keep the cost of the book down so that it could be, for the folks that have gone to Burning Man, it could be a gift to them as much as I can make it a gift.
Yeah.
And that they would read it and see all the thousands of Easter eggs that I put in the book, that they'll go, oh, I know who that guy is, or I know what that thing was. And for people that have never been, that it's a gift to them, in that there are some people that are going to read it that will never go to Burning Man. And I want them to have an experience of Burning Man that isn't the flashes that you see in the news, or the lascivious, conversations about, oh, this happened at Burning Man and that happened. I wanted them to have a lived-in experience of what it's like to be there and live on the Playa and build things and have to deal with what's going on out there.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And for the listeners out there that are new to this show, right now, when we're talking about writing and you got traditional publishing, you got self-publishing, there's kind of that battle, right? And what people don't realize is both have benefits. And one is not necessarily better than the other. Me personally, I think I have discovered that self-publishing is safer as far as if you're trying to protect your money, because there's so many, with the rise of self-publishing, it has brought together so many vanity type publishing companies that are just literally doing the same thing that you could have done for nothing and gave up a little bit of your royalties. Now you're paying people $5,000-$6,000 to do the same thing, and you think you're getting a traditional published. And to me, that's the dirty side of writing. However, what the real big difference is reach, right? When you're self-publishing, now you are the marketing company, you're the editing company, you're all of that. It is cheaper, but there's now more hats that you have to wear. What battles did you find when you went to self-publishing, Randall?
All of the above. So for each step of the way, so for me, just like you said, there is something protective that I wanted to do around this. You can develop prestige if you go with a big publishing house and all that, and maybe you sell more books faster.
Right.
But what I get to do is be in control of everything with my book now. And I know I can keep the prices low, and I can, as I've talked to people on burner lists that I'm on, they're like, is this cool? And I say, well, I'm not going to be making a living off this book. So think of it as a gift. But the things that I've had to deal with is not only figuring out editing and understanding what I needed to do with editing and getting help with that, but also how to translate that manuscript that I've developed, which I understand front to back and clarity, and then put it into both an electronic book form and in a publishable PDF form. And then realize after I get it out there, like, if you read the book today, there are some mistakes that I've found as I've read through it again, and I'm going to have to go back and do some adjustments and fix some of the structures so they look a little cleaner and stuff like that. And it's you while you have control of everything, like you said, you're wearing every hat. Yeah. So in wearing every hat, you have to teach yourself how to do things that you never thought you would have to teach yourself. Even how to push a book up onto Amazon, or talking with booksellers who say, yeah, I'll sell your book, but you have to put it on Ingram Spark in order for me to pick it up. So figuring out how to do each of those pieces as well. It's like having a job with no pay to figure out how to do all this stuff, because every step takes a lot to figure out.
Yeah. When you said things, I could feel this thought that was coming to me, and I don't want to just make the assumption, right? But I really feel as I've spoke with authors that people who self-publish, right? They published a book because they care more about the reader reading it than they did the dollars coming back from it. And I know with my book, I went that same route. I used Draft to Digital to publish my books. It's a self-publishing platform, just like anything else. And other than them printing your book and sending it to somebody, that's about all they do for you. It's you have to do all the other work. However, it gave me the ability to where I could buy my book back for a couple bucks. And I promise you, I have given away more books than I've sold. And I am good with that because, again, all I cared about was people reading it. I didn't care about people buying it.
You are so nailing it for me because for me, what kept me going for 20 plus years was that I wanted to finally deliver a story that was in service of the reader. That when they read it, that, like you said, you can drop truth bombs in a fictional story that you may not be able to do very well in real life, but you can really nail them in a fictional story. And I really wanted to tell a story that dropped all those truth bombs in a way that would really make a difference, that was really entertaining, that was funny, that was sad, that had all those pieces. I was married before I transitioned. We divorced over my transition, still very close. Mm-hmm. And her current husband, read the book, and he wrote me a text. This is one of the most meaningful texts that I got. He said, I learned so much, and I got so many insights out of this book. I really appreciate. I really enjoyed it, and that was super meaningful for me. And I know he's a tough customer. He usually doesn't like everything that he sees or touches. So to get that kind of feedback, that's what I live for, is that I get it into somebody's hands that can really appreciate it and let them read it. And I will probably give away more books than I sell as well.
Yeah. I used to joke with people, and I think a lot of that joke came from a little bit of my lack of self-confidence when I first wrote my first book. And I used to joke with people and tell them, like I said, look, if you want to buy my book, it's going to be in every pharmacy right next to the melatonin. Okay. And, and I was surprised at some of the reviews that I got back. And I have learned lately that I think with a lot of new authors, we sell ourselves short in our ability. And then we find our abilities through those reviews, like you just said.
I only acknowledge 2 people specifically in my acknowledgements, but honestly, 1,000 people over 20 years gave me feedback that made the story better. Yeah. And what I had to do in that process was set aside my ego, understand I was still in a learning process, and then take the feedback and move forward. What I realized is when I put the book down is when I heard the feedback, and I had this despair that I may never get there in being able to tell the story. And then I would, get my juice back up and I would go at it again.
This show is part of the Barracks Media Network, built by veterans, creators, and storytellers who believe stories change lives. Barracks Media produces podcasts, books, and digital content that amplify voices worth hearing. We help creators launch, grow, and monetize their message without losing their soul. If you've got a story in you, or a show in your head, go to barracksmedia.com and start building something that lasts.
Yeah, I did the same thing with my book. I put it down several times. The first several chapters was easy. And then when 9/11 document type stuff started happening, the chapters didn't write as fast. And, I would have to set it down for a while and walk away. And each time I did, I didn't know that I would ever go back. But there was always that drive to see it through and finish what I started. When with you, it sounded like you had those same things where things were just becoming overwhelming, whether it because of having to redo things or whatever. But now that the book is wrote, what are some of the things that you're hoping that the readers are going to take from this?
Yeah. So if I were to boil the theme of the book down to one word, the word would be belonging. And the interesting thing that I've learned about community, and now that I've had so much experience of actually participating in community instead of staying out on the edges of it, is there's kind of two parts to it. One is the community invites you in. And that's kind of the easy part, especially at Burning Man and Bring It, because those people just open their arms and welcome people in, no matter who you are, what you are. As long as you're not causing any problems, you're welcome. The other side of that coin is accepting the invitation. And what I found, especially in my first year at Burning Man, is I had people all around me out there and in life that were opening their arms and saying, we're here, we're your community, we want you in, but I wasn't accepting the invitation.
Yeah.
And what the germ of that was that I didn't think I deserved it. I didn't think I deserved community. And that first year at Burning Man had me examine that core, that burr that was under my saddle all week long. And have to deal with the fact that I wasn't welcomed into community because I wasn't accepting the invitation. And as soon as I did, I had a world of support around me. Yeah. So every one of these characters comes into Burning Man with some version of something in the way of them belonging and them having to deal with whatever that is and transform that thing to get to the other side of it.
Yeah. And that makes perfect sense to me, because anybody that's healing from anything, you don't even have to be specific. It's anybody that is healing is going to have shields up, and they're going to block those things that had hurt them in the past. And that's again a double-edged sword, because now, you are protecting yourself so that you don't get hurt again from that same way, but you're not going to be able to fully heal either, because you're going to stay in that comfort zone. And in order to heal, you have to get uncomfortable. With Burning Man, it sounds like that is another part of it, right? It's kind of like when you are still healing and you go to a place that is, like we talked earlier, past the healing point, and they're just at the welcoming point. We just want to have a great conversation and have a good time. We don't have to focus on the negative, right? And then you say, whoa, I don't know what to deal with this. I haven't ever experienced this before.
Wait, you weren't supposed to accept me?
Yeah, exactly. I can see how hard that would be. And I can almost imagine that with your characters, you really focused on that portion of it, of that integration between them healing and acceptance.
It's or that they are in a place, they come from a particular perspective that they can't quite get past that threshold. That whatever they do to protect themselves gets in the way, so they can't actually step through. So I have 7 characters, so I get to explore all versions of that. Yeah. And it was very healing for me to be able to say, well, what if I'd handled it this way? What if I had handled it that way? And then get different versions of what my life might look like had I made different choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get into this last part, right? As a author and somebody that wrote a book that you're very passionate about the message, what are you hoping that the readers are going to take from this?
So other than the core themes and having people have an experience, most people in the world are not going to make it to Burning Man. They won't ever have that experience. And there's so many unique things about Burning Man, but I'll bring up 2 that I really wanted to share with the world, other than that it's a real place with real people working hard to make this event happen. And it's not just a bunch of partiers out in the desert. So the 2 things that I took away from my first year, Burning Man operates on 10 principles. I'm going to talk about 2 right now that have made a huge difference for me. The first one is the gift economy. So the gift economy means that you can't buy, sell, or barter anything. You can only give things away. And that assumes that you're walking onto the Playa fully self-supported. It's called radical self-reliance, and that you have something more to give to others. So that something more could be the camp you're in and what the camp does. That something could be a personal thing that you want to do, like feed people something. And it's whatever is in your imagination that you want to contribute to the world. So what that does is you're walking down the street at Burning Man and somebody offers you a meal or a trinket or a service or whatever, you're more likely to say yes. Your walls are more likely to come down and be a yes to whatever happens. When I'm walking down the street here in Oakland or San Francisco, and somebody offers me something free, I'm immediately suspicious and I want to know what strings are attached. But when I'm out at Burning Man, the culture is to be generous. And one of my drivers is contribution. So being around literally 80,000 people that are contributing is an amazing, amazing thing to experience.
Yeah.
So your connections with people are immediate and they're intimate. So you could talk to somebody for a minute or have them in your life for the rest of your life. But whatever magic is on the Playa is like immediate intimacy and connection. And you can share parts of yourself that you've never shared before just because it's available. The other major aspect of Burning Man that really knocked me down the first year was it's about participation. There's no observers out there. There's no audience. Everybody is an actor on the stage out there. So, and everything out there, 99% of the things that happen out there are spontaneous. So you never know what's going to bubble up around you at any one moment. And I've had a million experiences where just walking down the street to go to somewhere, I never get there because I've had so many interruptions for whatever's going on, and I become part of the thing that you're constantly putting big pieces of yourself out into a receptive audience, so to speak, right? And that's another thing I would never do. I didn't ever want to be on the stage. I didn't want people looking at me. I wanted to just be behind the scenes, doing things. But out there, everyone is their own actor. So you become part of it, and it pulls something out of you that you just don't know what it's going to look like till it gets there. Yeah. So between those two principles, it took me out of my norm, so far out of my norm that I didn't know what to do with it. And I want people to be able to experience that in reading my book.
Okay. And if you got the opportunity to sit down with a new author, somebody that's just exploring the idea of writing their passionate project, what advice would you give them?
So the first one is just have time blocked off every day to write. If it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour every day, whatever it is, just write. And when you're writing, don't judge. You should turn your editor off.
Yes.
And just write and let it flow until you've run out of time to do it. And keep doing that every day. And after a while, you will compile something that is worth going back, looking at and saying, okay, what works about this, what doesn't work about it, etc. But the number one thing that a writer has to do is write. And you just have to give yourself time to do it every day.
Yeah. Man, I felt like you were talking to me, because I made that mistake. And my first book, I would write a few pages and then I would edit them. And then I would write a few pages and then I would edit them. And what I didn't know was when you go through the editing process, you're going to change things and things are not going to flow. Or you're going to get on chapter 20 and have to go back to chapter 10 and change something that you already edited because now it doesn't jive with what's going on in chapter 20. And what you said is the best advice that you can give somebody. And that is just write. Don't judge. If it comes in your mind, put it on paper. It doesn't have to make sense. The spelling don't have to be perfect. Your grammar don't have to be great. Put it on paper. There comes a time later in the process to go back and analyze those things. But what you're feeling and what you're thinking, get it out and put it down.
Yeah. So it's so important. And that turning off the editor part is so critical because it allows you to just be in your creative mind and flow. And eventually you're going to edit. But when you do, you are ruthless. You're ruthless about, I have so many babies that I had to throw out in the process. And it was there's so many great scenes that I wrote that will never make the pages of any book, but they just, they didn't serve the story.
Well, Burning Man it comes out every year. So next series of your book, those babies might be able to come back in when those same characters go to season 2.
That's true. And I'm thinking about what's next for me. I never thought I would think about what's next because, I was so busy. I was so occupied with that book. But now that there's more stories to tell, and they could be, I could have another year on the Playa that I do or something else. Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, Miss Sarah, I had a great time and I love talking about people's projects, especially like this. And I hope you enjoyed it. Can you tell everybody where are they going to get your book and where can they follow you and even learn more about Burning Man?
Sure. So, first of all, thank you for having me on here. And this felt less like an interview and more like just a conversation with a friend. So thank you for that.
Awesome.
So if you want to either read my book or contact me, you can find it on my website. It's Playa Dust in My Soul, all one word, .com. So Playa Dust in My Soul, all one word, .com. And you'll find both the book and its various forms and a link to get hold of me directly. There's lots of information out there about Burning Man itself. You can go to the Burner website and there's a lot of good information. But if you reach out to me directly, I will give you some of my I have a whole set of tips that I give people that go every year for how to pack, what to bring, what you're going to be dealing with, how to deal with it, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, I hope all of you guys pick up her book, make sure you read it. And again, I say it in all my episodes, don't be lazy, y'all. Leave reviews. Make sure that you leave the 5 stars. There's 5 stars there. Hit them. Leave some good reviews. It helps out everybody that writes books, podcasts, the whole 9 yards. You just do not understand how much a good review helps, not only with future projects, but algorithms of getting the book in front of more people so that they can read it and experience the same thing. So I want all of you guys, take the time, pick up the book. The links will be down here in the bio. Make sure you click on them, leave your reviews, and reach out. Follow Miss Sarah, learn a little bit more about Burning Man, and who knows, it sounds like I may be there one of these years here real shortly, and maybe we'll see y'all there. So y'all take care, be safe, and have a great day.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Authors After Action, a podcast from the Barracks Media Network. Thanks to our guest for sharing their story, and thank you for listening. You can explore more conversations like this across the Barracks Media Network. We'll see you next time.